Welcome to all of you who joined me from Substack. I got a lot of response to my posts. I'm sorry, who joined me from Reddit. That's what I meant to say on Substack. Got a lot of responses from you. Jay Gindoff, I see you popping in there. How you doing? Good to see you. I've been meaning to call you. Greetings to everyone. I have a bunch of questions from people submitted already, so I'm going to just start answering some of the stuff that was asked. Want to urge anyone who's over here who's not already a subscriber to please subscribe. You get my newsletters delivered to you, and I put in a 25% discount for paid subscription to anyone who is watching this. So click through on that. But whether you want to do a paid subscription or not, please do subscribe. It's really helpful. I need more subscriptions. I'm going to answer some questions. Somebody asked, is Friends of the Brothers going to be doing the Tedeschi Trucks Band after show parties at the Iridium again this year? Thank you for asking. Yes, we will, I hope. We're talking to them. We're sort of waiting for them to announce the dates. They haven't done them yet. I believe they will be back at the Beacon in March, and we are planning on doing it. I have a whole list of questions here, so let me take a look at my laptop. How long did Dwayne Betts spend in the woodshed to become the excellent guitarist he is now? He transformed. Yeah. Dwayne has come a long way. I think that's a lifetime project. I don't think there's a specific time that he entered the woodshed. I think, and I've talked to this a little bit about Dwayne, and I'll do a video with Dwayne soon, where we can ask him some of this stuff. It seemed to me that he really transformed during the time he played with Dawes. I don't know exactly what years this was. He was never formally a member of Dawes. He didn't record with him, but he toured as a touring member of the band for about 2 years. And I thought that was a before and after moment for him, and that after that, he was really, really strong. Somebody asked, how many stories could I tell but couldn't out of respect for the person the story would be about? You know, that's a sort of the answer to that is like infinity. There's so many. There's constant judgment about what I'm going to share and not share, what's appropriate, what's not. With some of the guys, it can become a little bit of a problem where a friendship and a journalist subject relationship sort of collide. And I realized that early on with Warren Haynes, especially. Warren is someone I'm really friendly with, and I could see him sometimes hesitate when we were just talking. This is just almost 30 years ago now, maybe 30 years ago in the 90s. And I had to tell Warren once I realized that was potentially an issue, that there's a strong line between an interview and a conversation, and that I would never use anything he tells me in conversation in print without asking his permission. And that's carried over, you know, into my relationships. But Warren was the one who helped me set that, because he was just the first person that I had that kind of relationship with that I was regularly writing about. Somebody asked, was Dickie and Jerry Garcia in touch or friends beyond the 70s? Were any of the band members particularly close with Jerry and the Dead, especially after Dwayne and Barry passed? The short answer to that is no. They really never did. There was a real split in Allman Brothers' Grateful Dead world, and I write about this quite a bit in Brothers and Sisters. So I would urge you to tune into that. If you haven't read Brothers and Sisters, I hope you will. If you haven't read One Way Out, I hope you will. I also wrote Texas Flood about Stevie Ray Vaughan. And any answer I give now about things that are in the book are definitely only going to be surface compared to what's in the books, and that very much includes the relationship between the Dead and uh, and the Allman Brothers. Things got really funky with them after Greg testified in '76. Um, Jerry may or may not have called Greg a snitch from a stage. I've never heard a tape of it. But Greg felt that he did anyhow, and that's all that really mattered. It really hurt Greg. Um, and it was a problem. So that relationship was never quite the same. In '93, I was working really hard, probably '93, '94. I was working really hard on getting uh doing a cover story at Guitar World about the Allman Brothers. And I was working with Kirk West, who was the tour mystic and sort of my deep connection with him then. And Kirk had this idea that I would do Jerry and Dickie together. And Kirk was really all in on it because he was absolutely convinced, and probably right, that if I could get Jerry and Dickie, if we could get Jerry and Dickie in a room together, their friendship would reignite and it would lead to them doing shows together. And I tried really hard for about a year. We had targeted some dates when the Allman Brothers were playing at the Warfield in San Francisco. And I really thought at one point that we were working towards something there. And then it just sort of crashed out and it didn't happen, which was really a bummer. And that's when we pivoted and did the Warren Haynes uh, Dickie cover, which I have on my wall right here. I'll grab this. Oh, look at this. Um, this was a signed cover. I don't really usually do autographs because it's sort of cheesy in my position, but Kirk got this for me. So it says, Alan, thank you for the great article, Dickie Betts, 94. And to Alan, thanks something. I don't know. All the best, Warren. Um, and that was awesome. That was a highlight of my career. But imagine doing Dickie and Jerry together, and we really tried. We really, really, really made an effort there. So that's the one that got away. I never did get to interview Jerry. Um, some other questions here. Some argue that the ABB became a different band when Dwayne passed. Of course they did. Then when Warren joined, what about when Dickie was kicked out? I mean, yeah. So the nature of the band was that everybody was expressing themselves. When new members came in, like, well, just think of Warren specifically, like when they reformed in 2009. And then even when he came back in 2000, I said 99, meant 89. He was initially stepping in and playing the Dwayne role on the old songs, but then they wrote a lot of material in which he was able to create his own parts. But the nature of the band was very much that person expresses himself. So naturally, when the personnel changed, the band changed. Each of those players were different. The way they interacted with each other was different. And then I guess you could say the biggest difference was when Dickie was no longer in the band, simply because then you had two completely different guitarists, Jimmy Herring and Derek, and then of course for 14 years, I guess it was Warren and Derek. Dickie's sound and his playing and his sense of melody and his notes and his phrasing were so much a part of the sound of the band, that when he was gone, that probably was the biggest difference of all. Um, but it was different with all of them, without a doubt. 1 second, I have to send a message to someone. So that would be my answer there. Um, and they were never the same after any of those guys were not in it because it was just inherently different. So Dickie was one of the greatest guitars ever, absolutely. And I think if you read my books, you'll know that I think that. Yeah, somebody just said, when will JMO's albums be put on Spotify? They were there. I don't know why they no longer are, and they should be. And I have meant to make it a project of mine to put them on, but I have just not had time to do that. I absolutely agree that they should be, Paul. Renaissance Man, I think, is one of the great unsung albums in the greater Allman Brothers catalog. Um, with regard to what I wrote about the Grateful Dead, was this done from afar, or did you do your own research? Any inside connections or input from the Dead Circle? Yeah. I mean, I've interviewed Bob Weir multiple times, Bill Kreutzmann, I interviewed Robert Hunter, uh, briefly interviewed Mickey Hart once, but not a real extensive one. O'Teal, of course, and various other guitarists who played in, uh, post-Jerry bands. Oh, Phil, I've interviewed a bunch of times. Of course, Warren, Kimmock, Mark Karen, Jimmy Herring. And I did do an ebook called Reckoning, which collects a bunch of my Grateful Dead interviews. It's available on Amazon if you just search for my name. And somebody asked, have I thought about doing a whole book on the Grateful Dead? And, of course I have thought of it. I just haven't quite hit an angle that I think covers something new. I don't want to repeat something. I did do a special one-shot magazine um, that really focused on the Grateful Dead album by album, studio album, that way. And I feel pretty good about that, and maybe there's something there to turn it in. Tyler asked about Andy Alador, who's, of course, my partner in Friends of the Brothers, and also we co-wrote Texas Flood together, the Stevie Ray Vaughan autobiography. Seemed to be cool to have him on a live stream. He'd like to know about working with Dickie. Yeah. Um, Andy used to do live streams on his uh, um, Facebook all the time. He doesn't seem to really do those anymore, but he's very accessible. So I would find Andy on Facebook. He's on YouTube all the time, posting videos. And yeah, I mean, it's a good idea. He should tell those stories. He has a lot of tales about Vicky that we've talked about many times. And working for Dickie was no joke. He could be the best guy in the world and the worst guy in the world. And that was just something that everybody who dealt with him knew. Tony from Boulder asked, how actively am I working to help promote the Toy Factory after its success at the Telluride debut? Well, it's not my job to promote. I mean, that's not exactly what I'm doing. Um, but I'm very much a supporter of that. If you saw on my Substack, Low Down and Dirty, I did a pretty extensive interview with Marcus King in which we talked about that. I have a great interview with Paul T. Riddle done and ready to go. I'm just waiting for them to have something to announce. It makes more sense to put it out then. They are planning on putting out an album, which I've listened to, and it's wonderful, and doing more shows. I think it's just really, really hard to line up the schedule. So as soon as Paul or O'Teal, tells me that they have something ready to go, I will definitely share that interview with Paul. And I guess I'll be actively promoting it. I'll probably do an interview with Charlie. I'll do an interview with O'Teal. But I don't think of my job as promoting per se. Um, yeah, so Phil asked about the Allman Betts Band, if they're still actively touring. Well, they're doing the Allman Betts Family Revival. That's gearing up anytime now. You can find that really easily, see if it's coming somewhere near you. Um, it's Yeah, I mean, that's happening. I wanna remind everyone about Friends of the Brothers. We're playing, November 22nd in Hartford, at Infinity Music Hall. Those tickets are available on our website, friendsofthebrothersband.com. You can find the links on my Facebook and stuff too. I know there's a lot more people on here than were when I first started. So I'll say again, please subscribe to my Low Down and Dirty. Subscriptions are really important. That's what keeps this whole thing going. And if you can afford it, to drop a few coins in the cup and do a paid subscription, that'd be appreciated. And I activated a 25% off uh, subscription, which is only $7 a month, I think, or $70 a year. Appreciate it. Somebody wrote, I just finished your book One Way Out yesterday. Thank you. And loved it. Thank you. How long did it take to compile all those interviews into one coherent story? And was there any one person you really enjoyed talking to get the definitive history? Um, Hard to say how long it took. The first version of that book was ebook only, and it was based on interviews I had already done. I combed through my extensive many years of interviews and put it together. In terms of putting it into a coherent narrative, I guess I had a vision of the narrative the whole time. Um, but um, Once I actually signed the contract and was doing the book, it probably took me 2 years. I had a strong narrative structure in mind the whole way. What I realized in doing the fresh interviews for the book, and what really blew my mind and blew the book open and took it to the next level, was when I dropped the idea that I think I began the process with, that I knew what the story was and I just had to find the quotes to talk about it, and opened up my mind to the fact that there was a lot of things I didn't know. And when I started getting surprised, um, that's when things got really interesting, because I had spent years digging into this. And the fact is, if I was surprised by things, you probably were going to be, you, the reader. So that was, that was fantastic. Um, so he says, and who did I enjoy talking to the most? Well, I enjoyed the whole process. So it's really hard to say. I mean, there were people who were especially super, super helpful. Like, I think for One Way Out, especially, JMO, Butch, Warren, and Chuck Leavell. Um, and then Chuck again on Brothers and Sisters, by the way, and JMO, on Brothers and Sisters. They were really available, like, to the point where I could text them or email them or call them, with specific questions, which sometimes are like, can be really small questions, to fill in holes and things like that, rather than doing a big interview. JMO was the guy I knew the least, at the start of that process, because, remember, I came into the Allman Brothers world through, um, Guitar World. So my initial relationships really were with Warren and Dickie and Alan Woody, to a somewhat lesser extent. But once Government Mule started, I was around them a lot, and so I got to know Woody more and more. And also just hanging out at the Beacon with Woody and Warren in their opium den backstage lair. Oh, my brain cells. I might be so much smarter if I had never set foot in those rooms. Um, but Yeah, and then other relationships developed, but, JMO, just by his nature. Greg, I got to know really well, through a bunch of interviews. I think I saw Brad Talinsky had logged in here. Hi, Brad, if you're here. Thank you for the assignments. Brad was the editor at Guitar World for years, and he's the one who really got me going on these. In journalism, in magazine journalism, it was pretty common for things to rotate. Like, if I did the Allman Brothers, the next time another writer would do it. Brad was really a believer in relationships. So I think his attitude was, once you established a relationship with someone, it made sense to just keep going back to that well. And then it was up to you to find something new to write, so you didn't repeat yourself. And there's some frustration there because there was a handful of people I would have loved to interview that I never did. Jimmy Page and Eddie Van Halen were Brad's guys. You know, Carlos Santana and Keith Richards were Alan DePerna's guys. Of course, I would have loved to interview any and all of those guys, but it really did pay off and make sense. And that allowed me to get really, really deep with Dickie and Warren, and then eventually everyone. And then I developed this relationship with Kirk West that brought me to being an insider. And that's what really cracked that open. Um, the other person I really, really enjoyed interviewing, that was a bit left field for me. I hadn't anticipated necessarily beforehand, was Tom Doucette, who I had never met. And I talked to Tom very late in the process. In fact, the book was already turned in, and I'd been trying and tried to get Tom, and I got him. And he didn't want to do a phone interview. He lives in Florida, and I was up against it with deadlines and stuff. But he was coming up to Philadelphia. He's a yoga instructor, and he had some kind of yoga, convention or big thing in Philadelphia. So I went down there, which is only like a couple hours from my house, and we started talking. He got so emotional. He said, "I got to walk and talk." And so we walked all through Philadelphia for probably 2 hours doing interviews. I was recording it on my phone in my hand. And, I was so nervous if it was recording because normally I would, be sitting somewhere, I'd be looking at it. I'd also take notes, have reference notes and stuff. I had none of that because we were walking. Luckily, it all came out, and he's a fascinating guy. We were walking, and when we got to talking about Dwayne's death, Tom got so emotional that he started crying. Well, he had to sit down. Like I said, we were walking and walking, and there was just a bench, and we just sat down. Like I think it was like on someone's porch, like stoop on a bench, and he put his head down, started crying, and kept talking. And it was really heavy, man. This was 40 whatever years after Dwayne's death, and it was like he was talking about someone who had just died. So just brutal. Taylor said, "Do you hear that the final Dwayne shows on the West Coast were recorded?" Um, yeah, Winterland 71. Um, you know, I'm just gonna not answer that, and I'll tell you why. I believe they were. I just, I'm talking off the top of my head, and I'm not that good actually with dates and numbers and things. I forget them more than people think I do. Yes, I believe they were because I know I've heard some of that stuff. And it sounded really good to me, which is interesting because remember that at that time, that's when they were really, really in the throes of some bad, bad heroin stuff. And they went into rehab right after that. And like to hear Butch tell it, things were falling apart. There's a whole story that's in One Way Out about him and Dwayne having a confrontation in which he, got in his face about it. So, um, yeah, but I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you on that. But if you message me, I'll try to have one for you next time I do one of these. Um, yeah, Sam says, "Love these chats. Thanks for doing them. You're welcome. Do I have any idea what TTB are doing at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this weekend?" Yeah, I mean, they're performing for Joe Cocker, because they did the Mad Dogs and Englishmen. I don't know more specifically than that um, about that. Um, Somebody wrote me, "Why does the archive for ABB live music?" Including, everything, feels second rate to bands like Fish and the Grateful Dead. It feels second rate because it is second rate. Why is it second rate? I mean, that's a whole other kettle of fish. I think the main reason, and this is just sort of me talking somewhat off the top of my head, but remember that the Dead, for their era, were completely unique, in that regard because they had Owsley. Nobody taped every show. I mean, it just didn't happen. Um, Owsley was the sound man. Owsley had a lot of money because of his drug dealing. Owsley was a fanatic with sound. when you go to a live concert today and it sounds good, whether you love the Dead or hate the Dead, you should thank them, because of what Owsley did had a huge impact on live sound, and he recorded them. Phish, a different era, obviously. They're the children of this, the Allman Brothers and the Grateful Dead. And they had the experience of the Dead and their success, with the live recording and the live shows, and so they recorded everything. The Allman Brothers also, it's worth remembering, in those eras, played the same set every night. Obviously, it would vary a little bit, and it would vary from tour to tour, and they would add songs and take songs out, but they essentially repeated themselves, and that was where Dwayne was coming from. It was much more of an R&B perspective of, learn the songs and really have them down. And so even if all those shows were recorded, it wouldn't have quite the same resonance as the Dead shows. That's really obvious if you look at the RFK 73 shows that they did with the Dead, and take a look at the set list that each band played each night. Allman Brothers had a little bit of variation. The Dead had, of course, completely different set lists. I explore all that in depth in Brothers and Sisters. So I'll tell you again, if you're interested in this enough to be listening to me babble about it here on Substack, you should definitely read my books, Brothers and Sisters and One Way Out. You should definitely subscribe to my Low Down and Dirty. I'm posting a lot. I'm working my butt off on this thing. And so please, if you care enough to be here, please subscribe. I'll answer a few more. If you have one, hit me with it now. But I have a bunch more that people had sent me earlier. Who's one rock star you've never met but would love to? I mean, geez, really, there's so many. Um, but mostly it's deceased people. Obviously Dwayne and Jimi Hendrix, but they were deceased before I was really, active and but the ones like Jerry Garcia, like I said, I was really pursuing him, and it never happened. And I wish Brad and I and the team at Guitar World had just become really, really dedicated to making that happen. We did try, we just didn't try probably hard enough. A weird one is Mark Knopfler. I have interviewed Mark Knopfler, but they've been like short interviews. I just love him and his playing, and he's very much alive, of course, and very accessible. So I should make that happen. There's a lot of them. What do I think of Red Dog's Book of Tales? I have that around here somewhere. It's great. I might be the only person that ever used that as a reference. It is in Brothers and Sisters. You know, that book pissed off some of the guys in the band. I mean, because he just let it rip. Willie Perkins, on the other hand, wrote his book. I think it's like he really, reined himself in. And so the story is a lot more PG than what was really going on. And that was not the case with the Red Dog. So, um, Brothers and Sisters is the best book in the ABB ever written, says Taylor. Thank you. I mean, what can I say about that except thank you? I agree. But did I have a chance to ask Larry McCray about Club Mississippi? Yeah, I did, and he just laughed and said, "Great place." There was nothing super in depth there, but for sure, Larry has a fondness for it. Um, a bunch of people wrote various forms of just saying, "Thank you for all your work on the Allman Brothers," and to which I say, "You're welcome," and thank you for saying that. I think I've said this before, but there was a point, from the I don't know, by the end of the '90s, mid-90s through, like, 2005 when I moved to China, I was doing so many articles, for Guitar World, and it was sorta like, "Oh, I gotta interview Warren again," and remember, it's all pre-social media. Sit here, write my articles. I worked in the office from '91 to '96, and then I was working from home. Um Send the articles off to Brad or whatever to edit, and then it comes out in the magazine, and then, you might get a letter to the editor or 2, but you're kinda just throwing them out in the void, And um, after a while, it's like, God, another interview with Warren. I'd be like, is anyone reading this stuff? Does anyone care? And when One Way Out came out, and I went out and did events, like I remember being at Wani, I did a talk and a book signing, and people come up to me and say some version of, you know, thank you so much. I used to live for your articles in Guitar World. I used to wait for them and like get the magazine and rifle through to see if you had written something. And those kept me alive, musically or whatever. And I was so moved by that. I can't tell you because I had no sense, So I've been blessed since One Way Out came out, and then of course Brothers and Sisters, to be doing that in this social media age, to get out and have the opportunity to meet a lot of you, to do more of that with Friends of the Brothers. And so I'm much more aware of that and of the impact it has, in that it means something to a lot of you, which I'm really, really touched by. I mean, I don't take that lightly at all. But when I first got that feedback, like I said, it was sort of mind blowing. So thank you. Um, let's see what else. I think I'm covering most of the questions people sent in. Oh, is there anything about Dwayne Allman that's not talked about enough that I think you should know? Um, I mean, yeah, there's a lot. If you look, I just reshared. I wrote, I think last year on the 50th anniversary of his death, I shared a post about Dwayne that was more of a reflection of him as a personality and as a musical figure. Um, I think that one of the things that's so striking about Dwayne is that he set the template for that band. He didn't sing, he didn't write songs. Pretty unusual, but he was the undisputed leader. And until the last note that the Allman Brothers band played as the Allman Brothers, it was always sort of WWDD, what would Dwayne do? Um, and I think that's pretty moving, he was such a personality, such a force. He inspired them so much, um, which isn't exactly musical, but it's also completely musical. It's completely relevant to, the music that they created. Somebody asked about any more stories about Dwayne and Clapton and Derek and the Dominoes. And I'm kicking around a project on the Layla album, which would go into that really in depth. So I'm just gonna leave that there as a tease. Somebody wrote me and asked what this guitar is. Um, it's kind of cool. It's it's not an expensive guitar per se. It's a Mexican made copy of a 57 Strat. It's a relic, it's not a real old one, but it's a super, super special guitar. Um, I don't know if you can see that. It says Farm Strat. This was some of you might recognize that letterer. That was Brian Farmer's, all of Warren's guitars were lettered with that. This was Brian Farmer, Warren Haynes' longtime guitar tech, and a good friend of mine, who passed away in 2014. This was his guitar. This was the one he took on the road. And I ended up not really intending to, but I had everyone in the Allman Brothers sign this guitar. Got JMO, Derek, Warren, Greg, O'Teal, Quinones. Wasn't the plan. In fact, I bought this guitar intending to play it as a gigging guitar. Um, it hasn't been tuned, so but I didn't become a playing guitar because of that. I had it shellacked. It's safe. It stays right here. I do take it down sometimes, tune it up, and play it. But yeah, thanks for asking. I do most of my um, interviews and live streams and stuff sitting right here, and people ask me about that guitar all the time. So I'm glad somebody asked it in a live setting. Taylor said, excited you're thinking about a book looking at that story. Thank you. Yeah, let's see what happens. Okay. I probably shouldn't have even said it, but I never like to talk about book projects until they're well underway, but I'm kicking the tires on a few things, and that's one of them. Let me see if there's anything else that popped in. I'm gonna have to go in a minute. But oh, that story I've heard about Barry Oakley. I mean, I think that for the best story I've ever heard about Barry Oakley, you should read my books because I can't uh I can't think of it off the top of my head. But Barry was a cool guy. JMO loved Barry. He's probably the most interesting to talk to. I learned in over the years, like Barry and Butch were not very close. They got along fine, but they didn't hang out outside the band shell, the bandstand. But Barry was so broken by Dwayne's death to an extent that I it's kind of wild. I've never seen anything else quite like that. Um, And JMO told me that he was just, this is a quote from JMO, I was just as fucked up by Barry's death as Barry was by Dwayne's death. They were super, super close. Uh, Barry was very much second in command to Dwayne. Dwayne was really direct. I mean, his way of dealing with people was to say, motherfucker, that's what you're going to do. And this is all really from JMO's description. And Barry was more capable of, hey man, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Let's have a meeting. Let's talk about it. He had better interpersonal skills than Dwayne, who just was like, you know, this is how it's going to be. Um, Barry was the man of the people. He was the one who had the idea of playing free in the park. He was the one who was always concerned about ticket prices and keeping them low. He was like a true believer hippie, I would say. But in terms of like the best stories about him, again, I'd urge you to read the book. Um, Hi, Eric Hoffer. I see that. Bill says your notes look like a set list. I don't know what note you're talking about, but I mean, my whole desk is I got so much stuff everywhere. It's like I'm scribbling notes constantly, to do lists. I have books everywhere stacked up. This is a great book. Peter Grolnick's book, The Colonel and the King. Another great book right here. Sharing the Groove. That's an oral history of jam bands. I'm just constantly reading music books. Here's my own book, Brothers and Sisters, Prine on Prine. It's interviews with John Prine. And I think some of you guys would get a kick out of this. This is an album that's just coming out, and I will be writing something about it by Willie Williams, guitar player who plays with Leroy Cornell. He sent this to me, and it's really good. And I appreciate the vinyl and the old school look and the little liner note. And the packaging is really good, and so is the album. But I have so many things here. Somebody's asking me what's sitting on my desk. I mean, um, book writing about the people's experience with Sinead O'Connor, Levon Helm, focusing on the Ramble years, biography of Earl Hooker, one of my favorite blues guitarists. I haven't read most of these yet, by the way. American Standard, Cheap Trick Story by my friend Ross Warner. This is great. I've only flipped through most of these, but um, this is a great one. She's a Badass, about women rockers. So Washita Love Child over here, a good one about biography of Jessie Ed Davis. Loud and Clear, history of the Wall of Sound. And the last one here, collections of writings by one of my favorite writers, Stanley Booth. And Stanley passed away recently. And next time I'll tell you some Stanley Booth stories because I got some good ones. I'm going to have to wrap it up now. I got to go have dinner and go play softball. I play softball on Wednesday night. Thursday, yeah, what's today? Wednesday nights. Yeah, see my take on Margot Price. Last question. I mean, I like Margot Price a lot. I don't know her super well, but everything about her, both as a personality and a musician, um, I like a lot. Um, so uh, I'm gonna get ready to sign off here. Thank you all for tuning in. Like I said at the beginning, please, if you haven't subscribed to Low Down and Dirty here on Substack, please do it. It really helps. I need to build my numbers. And if you can afford to drop a few bucks in a coin and do a paid subscription, I put in a 25% off in honor of this chat. Appreciate you all tuning in. I know it's been a while since I've done one of these. I actually do enjoy doing them. And so I will try to do it again soon. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for your support. Subscribe to Low Down and Dirty. Keep following me on all these various things. Come to see Friends of the Brothers when you can. And that's it. We'll keep it going. Thanks, brothers and sisters.